Have you ever thought about just how profoundly a parent's teaching shapes a child's understanding of guns? Often, contrasting upbringings forces us to have a broader conversation about how inherited beliefs left unexamined can define how the next generation responds to rights, America's founding principles, and the importance of self-defense.
Dan Was, author of Good Gun, Bad Guy,
Second Amendment advocate and author extraordinaire, Dan Was.
Good Gun, Bad Guy. Dan Was joins me now.
Dan Was is my guest, and he's here.
David grew up in a small, unassuming house where conversations at the dinner table were often about history, faith, and responsibility. His parents believed that values were best taught through example, experience, and honesty, rather than force, fear, and lies. And that philosophy proved to be the strongest guide a child could have. On Saturday mornings, David's father would read to him about the founding of the United States. He talked about the Constitution and how it was words written by real people who understood human nature and the need to protect freedom. And when the topic of the Second Amendment came up, he explained that it was part of a larger idea. It was a recognition of responsibility, free will, and the ability to prevent government from subverting the freedom of the people. It wasn't about fear or anger, but about trust in citizens to act wisely and have the tools to preserve the freedom the founders demanded. David's mother added another layer. She talked about gratitude for rights and faith in God that taught humility. They prayed together, thanking God for the freedoms they had, and always asked for the wisdom to use them well. In their home, respect for gun ownership went hand in hand with respect for life, their neighbors, and their community. When David asked questions about the guns they used, his parents listened. They taught him that owning firearms required care, maturity, and that rights should always be paired with compassion, education, and a strong will to preserve those rights. Freedom must be valued because there will always be someone who wants to take it away from you. Without a value for it, you'll relinquish it, his mother would say. As David grew older, he would see the Second Amendment just as his parents did, not as something to divide people, but as something to be cherished. It was something he knew our founding fathers saw as very important, so he always respected it. Because David was raised with calm guidance and clear boundaries, he never learned to fear guns. He learned to respect them. His parents emphasized that lack of knowledge breeds fear, while knowledge and responsibility builds confidence. So they focused on teaching awareness, safety, and self-control. By growing up in an environment where questions were welcomed and safety was always placed first, David understood that confidence came not from recklessness or power over others, but from doing things the right way. That steady, thoughtful approach shaped his outlook, replacing fear with understanding and respect. Now, Noah grew up in a house where fear was spoken loudly and often. From an early age, his parents talked about guns as if they were threats to humanity or weapons that were designed for killing as many people as possible. He was taught to call firearms assault weapons or weapons of war, and that guns were responsible for violence. They even repeated the term gun violence over and over, so Noah would associate the two almost as synonyms. They didn't explain history or responsibility. Instead, they spoke in absolutes, using emotion-driven words to make sure Noah would have negative, fearful, and angry visceral responses anytime the topic of guns would come up. Any mention of gun ownership was met with anger, and anyone who owned one was described as reckless and cruel. Questions were discouraged. And when Noah asked why people valued certain rights, he was told that those people were dangerous or ignorant. Over time, he learned that curiosity only led to conflict, so he stopped asking questions and continued absorbing his parents' negative gun programming. Irrational gun fear became his inheritance, passed down through overheard conversations and enhanced by tense news broadcasts and constant warnings about guns and the other side, who he was led to believe was reckless and intentionally putting everyone in danger because they wouldn't give up their gun rights.
We don't have a monopoly on bad people in this country. We don't have a monopoly on mental health issues in this country. We have a gun problem. in this country.
Now, guns became a symbol of everything his parents resented. That resentment hardened into hostility. As a result, Noah grew up believing that outrage was the same as moral clarity, and that shouting was a substitute for knowledge. Without real understanding, his imagination filled the gaps, turning his anger into rage. As he got older, that fear turned outward. He felt justified in confronting gun owners with harsh words, convinced that anger made him righteous. Protests gave him a place to release emotions he never learned to examine or understand, and the crowd's intensity rewarded his resentment. The less he understood, the more certain he felt. In Noah's world, ignorance created fear, fear created anger, and anger was mistaken for virtue. What his parents never realized was that by refusing to understand what they opposed, they didn't teach their son discernment. They taught him hostility, which made him loud, obnoxious, full of anxiety, and perpetually at war with things he had never truly learned about. One evening, as Noah was walking home alone from a protest, a group of his fellow radicals mistakenly took him for their opposition. They cornered him and threatened him. Some had weapons. Panic set in, and Noah desperately tried convincing the angry group that he was one of them. Before the situation could become worse, a voice cut through the tension. David, who didn't know Noah, was passing by and stepped between Noah and the attackers. Calm and steady, he revealed that he was armed, and it would be in their best interest to turn around and walk away. He didn't shout or threaten them. Just his presence and quiet confidence were enough to make the attackers reconsider and retreat, unwilling to escalate the moment any further. Now, David stayed only long enough to be sure Noah was safe. He offered no lecture or judgment. He just simply asked if Noah was okay. He explained that he carried the firearm for his own protection, but also believed in protecting the lives of others when there were no other options. Then he left, expecting nothing in return. But Noah's response wasn't gratitude. He was shook up, he was embarrassed, and he lashed out, accusing David of being part of the problem that he had been taught to despise. Rather than reflecting on the fact that a thoughtful young man with a firearm had put himself in danger to protect someone else, Noah clung to the fear he had inherited. The moment that could have sparked understanding instead hardened his resentment. In the end, the contrast was clear. One young man acting from compassion and responsibility, the other unable to see past the anger he'd been taught. The rescue changed nothing for Noah, except to prove how deeply fear once planted can refuse to let go, even in the face of being saved. I'm Dan Wass. Thanks for watching Good Gun, Bad Guy. Share this with those who need to see it. And remember, the Second Amendment is not a privilege. It's your right.